Right then, this is the ethological approach to aggression. This is for AQA psychology, specification A. And we're going to start by thinking about what is ethology. It might be something you haven't come across before. It's just a science that combines zoology, biology and comparative psychology. And what ethologists do is they observe and they analyse the behaviour of animals in their natural environment. And what they then do is develop theories about the behaviour that they've seen. They think about how the genetic and the environmental factors interact with each other. It's linked to evolutionary psychology, so they consider what the survival benefit is of certain behaviours and how the genes and environmental factors are interacting to produce behaviours that are adaptive. So aggression and ethology. Aggression is innate to survival, is the view of ethologists. If you think about animals in the wild, they have to compete for resources, and they would do that by fighting each other. They also have the need to fight for the ability to reproduce. That's sexual selection if you're thinking about your evolutionary theory. And they would have to, animals in the wild, many animals would have to fight over mates, and those that are the most aggressive would get the best mate, basically, so they're more able to pass on their genes and survive. Territoriality is where an animal has a territory and they will fight to defend it or fight to gain territory, and so that's another adaptive feature of aggression, because when you have territory you have resources and you're more likely to be able to survive. Dominance hierarchies is something that also occurs in humans, and this is basically the idea that those who are most aggressive get to the top of whatever hierarchy or status or society they're in. They have the highest status, it gives them more power, they're able to get access to more resources and so on. So this is all about what behaviours are adaptive, and it's suggesting that aggression is an adaptive behaviour, and they've come to this conclusion having observed animals in their natural environments and looked at how their genes are interacting with their environment. That's the theory that ethologists have come up with. There's two new terms you need to be aware of when looking at the ethological approach. The first is fixed action patterns, and this is basically a collection of stereotyped behaviours which occur in certain conditions or circumstances, and they're innate. So for example, when an animal is faced with another animal in a certain pose, there will be basically a series of a pattern or a series of behaviours triggered that will always be the same, and they're always triggered by the same stimulus. That's what a fixed action pattern is. The other thing you need to know about are innate releasing mechanisms, and this is basically the hardwired neural network, the kind of circuit of neurons in the brain which produce and trigger the fixed action patterns in response to an appropriate stimulus. And it's called innate releasing mechanisms basically because it's the idea we have an innate inbuilt mechanism for aggression, and that the aggressive behaviour then acts as a release for that, so innate releasing mechanisms. And Lawrence actually argued that it's like aggression is a really important thing for humans, just in the same way as food and drink and sleep are, that basically this desire to be aggressive builds up until it's finally released and then it starts to build up again. So if we look a little bit more at fixed action patterns, here are some features of them. They are unchanging. I've made all these start with U to make them easier to remember. Unchanging stereotyped sequences of behaviours. They're the same every time. They're universal. They're in every single individual of a species. They are not affected by learning, so that links back to the fact that they're innate. We're born with them. They're not affected by learning that takes place over an animal's lifetime. They still occur. They are unstoppable, so once they've been triggered, they have to carry on to completion. They are unique to one situation. And a unique specific stimulus will trigger them as a response. So that's basically 6 different features of fixed action patterns. Now there's 2 key studies that we're going to look at in relation to this area of the spec, and this first one is the most important one, and it's a study of sticklebacks, which is a type of fish. And Tinbergen observed a stickleback, and he basically tried to trigger the fixed action patterns in this stickleback. First of all, he presented the stickleback with this top model, which was a model of a stickleback, and you can see it's just plain coloured. And in that case, he just couldn't get the sticklebacks to attack it. But what happened was, when he presented various different objects, as long as they had like a red spot or a red area on them, the sticklebacks would always attack them. No matter how weird they looked, no matter how little like a fish they looked, the sticklebacks would always attack them and continue until the behaviour was complete. And that was their fixed action patterns being triggered by something specific, in this case the red spot or red area, and needing to carry on with those fixed action patterns until they were complete. So that's a really nice supporting study for this area, for this explanation, sorry. The next piece of research that we're going to look at as well, which is another quite nice supporting research, was by a guy called Sackett. He actually looked at this same process happening in monkeys. And not quite the same, actually. They were shown pictures of other monkeys in various poses, like, for example, playing or exploring or threatening. And as the monkeys matured, they started displaying these reactions to the threatening poses. And actually, since the monkeys had been raised in isolation, this showed that it was an innate inbuilt response that they had. It was not something that they'd learnt from other monkeys, that if someone's aggressive, you have to be aggressive back. It was actually innate, because they'd not had the opportunity to learn it from anyone. So that was quite a nice study, in that it showed the innate supports the idea of aggression being an inbuilt innate response that we have, that might be to do with survival and adaptive behaviour. Okay, we've got various different evaluation points here. The first points are obviously the support from those 2 studies. We've then basically got 4 negative critical points. So the first thing that we can argue is that actually humans don't have fixed action patterns like animals. We can't really generalise from animals to humans. We have really different environments. We don't have to fight for our resources in the same way. Animals may have them because it's useful for them in the situation, but we can't say that about humans. So that's the first issue with this explanation. The second issue with this explanation is that actually when aggression is triggered in humans, it's different. You've got different people reacting differently in the same situation, and that says that actually it's not universal, like it was argued by the ethologists, that actually in animals you can see that every member of the species will react in exactly the same way to a certain stimulus. That humans are not like that. We can put 2 different people in the same situation, they'll react completely differently. So that's kind of criticising the point about fixed action patterns, saying that they're universal. In this case, they're not universal. So again, that throws doubt on whether we can generalise from animals to humans. Another point to make is that the research lacks validity. One of the things that we've talked about at the very start of this topic was whether you have to have an intent to be aggressive. And actually, in animals, we can't tell if they have aggressive intent. It may be simply a survival instinct, and we have to measure aggression in animals based on the outcome, but we can't tell whether they've got aggressive intent or not, whether they're what they're feeling at the time. And because they're animals, they can't communicate it to us. So we may not be measuring aggression. And the last point to make is that in humans, aggression is actually not adaptive. It might actually lower the chance of reproductive success. Actually, in our current society, aggression isn't really valued in terms of finding a mate and sexual selection and all that. If a male acts aggressively, that may well mean that a female might be scared of them and are less likely to be their partner. So actually, in current society, you could argue that aggression isn't adaptive at all for humans. So that really makes us question this explanation, because if the ethological explanation is a valid explanation, we should find that it also holds for current society, and it doesn't. Okay, that was the ethological explanation.